What's up, Goth Virus Nation? It's your boy, back in the Gothmobile, gorilla YouTubing it out here. We got a weird one today. Trigger warnings across the board. There's gonna be lots of, stuff you probably might not want to. Here's the video. Manhunt is a stealth-based survival horror game developed by Rockstar North and published by Rockstar Games for the PS2 in 2003, then Xbox and PC the following year. It has since been made available digitally on both PS3 and PS4. In the mid-90s, a Scottish studio called DMA Designs would release a small game about doing robberies and other assorted crimes while evading the authorities, called Grand Theft Auto, for PC as well as a PlayStation port with some cut characters and features. Obviously, that was a big hit for them, and a bit of a departure from their previous work. People really liked this game, and they've been able to make a couple more of them since, though the concept behind the game has changed in the intervening years to become much more meta. In the most recent one, you get robbed, and Rockstar runs away with your money. Take-Two acquired Grand Theft Auto's publisher BMG in 1998, and made their subsidiary, Rockstar Games, publish the franchise's next two entries. After that, they just said, fuck it, we'll buy DMA Designs 2 and just fully embrace that GTA life. So they were rebranded Rockstar North, all the while working on a game called Manhunt, a project that had been forming since the early 90s. Even though this was sort of Rockstar North's baby, Rockstar Games was very divided on moving forward with it. A former employee would describe the atmosphere during this time as near mutinous. The reason for this was in no small part the fault of the media's reaction to Grand Theft Auto 3. If every news channel in the US was already blaming Columbine on Doom, you can imagine the hornet's nest that a game where you can freely shoot and run over innocent pedestrians would kick. Rockstar's most successful game at the time was ran through a bad press gauntlet.
It's as close as you can get to killing someone without being arrested or really killing someone.
It's my general object of this game. Kill as many people as you can, get as many stars as you can.
Someone would think if it's that easy on the game, you could probably do it in real life.
Kids, could you fucking pretend not to be a monster for 1 second? You're making us all look bad. Despite the game selling absurdly well and receiving near universal acclaim amongst Game Boys, numerous publications, gaming related and otherwise, took turns announcing their revulsion with the game. It was banned in Australia, but what isn't? And more unfortunate is the matter of the real-life crimes that were attributed to Grand Theft Auto 3. The most notable being when two stepbrothers from Tennessee fired a shotgun at random cars on an interstate, killing one person and wounding another. The details of this crime, and others, and further inquiry into the mental states of these kids that would become spree murderers, it kind of bled into white noise once they admitted to playing Grand Theft Auto 3. Rockstar and Take-Two took a lot of heat for this. It was not a good look. Didn't stop them from putting out a sequel the next year, but a bad look nonetheless. With the release of Grand Theft Auto Vice City, the cycle begins anew.
We are training our kids to be killers, and we are training our sons to treat women like whores. And here's how I got there.
So, considering how much they had weathered, moving forward with a shamelessly brutal and violent game that can't exactly hide behind a veil of satire or choice seemed ill-advised. Seemed like the opposite of laying low, which might be the smart move when you're being blamed for murder. Not speaking from experience, of course. Maybe some higher-ups at Rockstar had assumed all press is good press. Every time we put out something shocking, it's the most effective free advertising. By publicly condemning the game, you only make it all the more tantalizing. Even with internal concerns about the game's content, the game was released to predictably polarizing reviews. The Chicago Tribune called it the Clockwork Orange of video games, and the most important video game of the last 5 years, while official Xbox magazine would write, Manhunt is shallow, ugly, repetitive, and ultimately boring as hell. Don't avoid Manhunt because it's sick, avoid it because it has no redeeming gameplay quality, period. Even worse critics were New Zealand's Office of Film and Literature Classification, who deemed the game's violence injurious to the public good, and made it the first video game banned in New Zealand, though it was technically on sale for a good month before it became an offense to own it. Germany would go one step further and confiscate copies of it for portraying killing and vigilantism as fun. A tragic real-life murder, this time a 14-year-old boy in the UK, would once again be awkwardly foisted on the shoulders of Rockstar North, when a copy of Manhunt was in some fashion maybe possibly tangentially found around the vicinity of someone involved in a murder. A 17-year-old named was responsible and employed a hammer and a knife to inflict something in the ballpark of 50 wounds on this poor kid. So it would be easy to see a link between that and a game where you can in fact murder somebody with both of those things, though it's hardly a concept we can credit Rockstar with inventing. This was exacerbated when American attorney and famed game hater Jack Thompson leapt from his desk as though he heard an ambulance racing by.
Oh well.
And convinced the parents to sue Sony and Rockstar, though the day after they hired this attorney, the police concluded that the murder was motivated by a drug-related robbery, as was fearful of a debt owed to a gang, and Manhunt's significance in this case was less than tenuous as the copy was found in the victim's room and not the murderer's. Not that that would matter a whole lot. Needless to say, the lawsuit was quietly dropped shortly after, but would be dug up again by the same dude when Rockstar was preparing to release Bully in 2006 and Manhunt 2 in 2007. And both incidents would end in much the same way. He yells at clouds saying he's gonna get all these games banned, and then he quietly bows out.
I move for a bad court thingy.
Manhunt is a very original and promising premise, but it is one of those concepts that is so strong that it doesn't have to be much more than the blurb on the back of the box to move copies. And, I mean, it isn't. A death row inmate and guy of some sort named James Earl Cash is about to be executed by lethal injection, only he wakes up sometime later to a person referring to themselves as the director, feeding him instructions through an earpiece, while watching him on a series of security cameras. This mysterious savior promises Cash freedom on the condition that he take part in a snuff film production that he has prepared for him by hiring members of a low-level gang to patrol a derelict area of the fictional Carcer City, with orders to kill him on sight. We don't know anything about our protagonist, but he clearly takes to this concept competently enough, seeing how easily and emotionlessly he dispatches these gang members. Makes me think that he probably wasn't on death row due to some big misunderstanding. He probably tore a lot of labels off some mattresses in his life. Those stack up, buddy. After making it through this challenge alive, Cash is confronted by the Wolf Brigade. I set myself up for that joke, and then I didn't even get it as I was saying it. Cerberus. The joke was that they look like the dudes from Wolf Brigade. Fuck me. A shadowy, well-armed private security group in the employ of the mysterious director. It becomes clear that this singular challenge is only the beginning of what he has in store for what's his name? So from here, Cash is forced to brutally murder a revolving door of increasingly aggressive and unpredictable gangs, ranging from Nazis to whatever the baby faces are. It's a lot. I feel like once we move beyond guys in hoods or skinheads, we dip pretty hard into magic realism. Or rather, you become aware that we've been there the whole time. Some of these gangs, I find it hard to believe, would go through the trouble of creating such a coordinated uniform out of baby masks and Hawaiian shirts or what have you. Save for some kind of mildly post-apocalyptic crime world, a The Warriors scenario, which I don't have enough data to know if that's the case. So for a while, it's gonna feel like this is the loop. We get tossed into a new deserted part of town, cut everyone's heads off, Cerberus picks us back up, and we go on to the next area. All the while, the director expresses either his macabre pleasure or boredom depending on our performance.
You're gonna turn the Slash world on its head.
And you know what? It's not a bad loop. However, there are a few plot points, believe it or not, so if you would like to experience the rest of the story on your own, go ahead and skip to the end where I'll sum up my feelings. In the meantime, we can cover some other gamer news. You guys been playing that cute new game where you collect little cute things and you customize your character in little fun ways? If you want to know my opinion on Doom Eternal, I mean, firstly, it feels good still. I still feel like I am tearing ass through demons. I'm also not opposed to the sort of sillier, Evil Dead-like slant it seems to be going down, and I love the addition of the chanting demon choir to the soundtrack. I also like how bits of the demons fly off as you're shooting them. It's very disgusting. Not as crazy about all the acrobatic stuff. I don't remember any of that in the last one. I don't know if I care for it, probably because I'm not good at it. I still hate the UI and all the convoluted, overly designed menus. I keep getting lost in my ship because it all looks the same. And then we're like a Did Doom Guy's like an angel marine man? I just thought he was like a dude. He's Doom Guy. But there's like this whole other race in space that fight demons, and I don't know. The most egregious thing is that I can't just punch things. It's like I'm almost done with the game and I still haven't given up just pointlessly punching enemies, thinking it's going to do something to them, when it only sometimes does it because of the blood punch power thing. I don't know. These are nitpicks. It's a fun game. Anyway, at a certain point, the director reveals that he's captured Cash's family and poses the challenge that he makes it through this area without being spotted. Every time he is spotted, one of his family members will die. So you gotta make it through here, freeing as many as you can. Regardless of how many you rescue, it is later revealed that he killed them all anyway. But the more shocking part about this reveal is that Cash expresses something in response. He seems legitimately ticked. Which is like, I don't know this guy. I guess he probably liked his family. They probably had mixed feelings about him due to him being on death row. I don't know. I feel like I was supposed to feel something here maybe. And it scares me that I didn't because, well, the death of a man's family seems like a very grave matter. But like, I don't care about any of these people or this world. Everyone in it is kind of a jerk. Like, Cash is, I guess, the closest we get to a good guy, but he's also a sadistic murderer. But he's also being forced to be one. But he already was one. I don't know, you tell me if you had any kind of reaction to that, and we can swap medications, I guess. Eventually, Cash is brought to his final challenge, following a man dressed as a rabbit through an asylum, now in the control of a gang called the Smileys. Once he catches up with the rabbit, the director reveals that he never intended to let Cash go free, and has prepared an ambush of armed Smileys to take him out. From here on out, Cash goes rogue and no longer hears from the director. Surprisingly, much of the game after this point feels maybe more tense but less interesting. That voice following you around sort of pulled the whole idea together, and without it, it feels a little lost. Cash evades the remainder of the hired gang members and is rescued by the reporter from the game's opening. That I'm now realizing I didn't mention. In the opening cutscene, there's a reporter. It wasn't like a big whole thing. You can go back and watch it if you want. Fuck you. Cash continues to be nothing short of unlikable when expressing his gratitude for this act. It also really displays why it's for the best that he doesn't say much throughout the game.
Okay, let's go. Huh? To your apartment. Drive!
The reporter explains that the man who orchestrated all of this is Lionel Starkweather, a disgraced former film producer from Los Santos, somewhat tying this game into the GTA verse. She has been collecting evidence on this guy in an effort to expose him and his snuff film ring, and now with tonight's events has enough to take him down. Cash agrees to help her retrieve her files on him from her apartment, but along the way, police and SWAT teams hunt for him, as their corrupt chief has been blackmailed by Starkweather. I forgot that every once in a while, a cutscene would show up with zero context, and it shows a person with a pig's head making pig noises, being chained up and fed like an animal. It's not until around here that these seemingly unrelated clips become relevant. The police get the drop on Cash and are about to execute him when Cerberus interferes and transports him to Starkweather's lavish estate. Before they can even present Cash to him, the pig-headed man from earlier, revealed to be imprisoned here, breaks free and starts slaughtering Cerberus forces with a chainsaw. After fighting his way through all the guards, Cash finally faces off against the pig boy, instead of the two of them forging some kind of alliance born by their shared hardships. Cash saws off his hands and drops him down a stairwell. With just the two of them left and chainsaw in hand, Cash breaks down the door to Starkweather's office and lackadaisically disembowels him as he asserts,
I made you!
Sometime later, we see that the reporter did indeed go public with her evidence, exposing Starkweather's snuff film ring as well as the police chief's complicity. Cash somehow disappeared in the midst of all this and is never seen again. Stay tuned for that sequel that he isn't in. It's a surprisingly cathartic end to what has been a pretty bleak game. I always thought it odd how final it feels. You get the impression that they really only had one of these in the chamber, and the likelihood of them getting a sequel was probably pretty low. It wasn't made with a franchise in mind, which is not a bad thing. I think Rockstar should dabble more in linear storytelling because it's a hell of a lot more intriguing to me than their open world effort. This may come as a surprise to you, but after such a rough, rigorous, hands-on experience, I like me a happy ending. But I think I would have liked Cash to die at the end of the game. Like, that's literally the only thread left to pull at, that this guy is still alive somewhere. That's why they did a totally different thing for the second one. Okay, Can you just like indulge me and I'll just rewrite half of the game here? What I would have done, someone who's never written a game or anything outside of a short story in a creative writing class I took at a community college once almost a decade ago. I would have had Starkweather have a weird, fucked up, paternal, but also vaguely sexual relationship with the pig monster man. Now hold on! Stop pushing me. I have a good reason. 1, because it would be really weird. 2, it would make this thing more significant than, by all definitions, a creepy non sequitur that is not even really mentioned by any other character. I don't remember anyone yelling, "Send in the pig boy," but and use that line too, I want that in there. But third, and most importantly, it gives Starkweather something to care about. So Cash could, well, also I'd give Cash more dialogue, and I'd implement some means, either flashbacks or something, to explain why he is on death row, so maybe I'd care what happened to him by the end. And yes, I'd probably go schmaltzy, like he took the fall for the murder of an abusive step-parent or something. It's difficult subject matter, but like, I'm trying to meet them at their level, you know? I'd also make the journalist a character with a name who has other characteristics besides being scared, annoying, and being a shopaholic. This moment where Cash tells her, "You're my backup in case I don't make it, have a nice life," would firstly be more polite, but secondly, be the thing we call back to at the end, kind of like Watchmen. In fact, exactly like Watchmen, shamelessly so. So once Cash gets to the mansion, we can keep Pig Boy as the final boss, only this time he has importance. Killing him deeply upsets Starkweather, who kills Cash, not knowing that his public downfall was in the works elsewhere, causing him to flee the country and start up operations elsewhere. This leaves the game's strongest asset to be a reoccurring antagonist in future titles that don't exist because this didn't happen. Is it neat? Huh? You can tell I only had that one class, can't you? "I made you" is a really good line to go out on, though. I'd like to keep that in somewhere. Okay, I'm conflicted with Manhunt's story. On one hand, the sheer gall, the nerve of it impresses me. There are moments where I think this bizarre murder world vibes with me just right, and I feel immersed, and I feel dirty. That's when it's working, when I feel like everything about the experience is just loathsome. The guy I'm controlling is a scumbag, the people I'm killing are scumbags, the world is an extended gutter, and I'm skulking around it in the dark, strangling, stabbing, suffocating, and beating them without an ounce of remorse. I'm congratulated for it by someone who is getting off on the whole process. In fact, I caught myself feeling kind of good about it. I mean, they did a great job of making these people absolutely insufferable, and just asking to be bludgeoned to death, constantly throwing around racist and homophobic slurs, calling me names.
Goddamn pansy! Show yourself, you fairy! Stop jerking us around! Come on, you fucking chicken!
Just call me a chicken? Who's the chicken? It's a very manly game. I don't know if I've ever felt insecure masculinity emanating from a video game before.
Gotta whip these guys into shape. They're soft, like my daddy was.
It is constant buff guy chat-on-chat violence, like, "Quit hiding, you fucking get out here and compare your to my This is how we will decide who is the victor in the impasse we find ourselves in." Anyway, with all the reveling in murder, it feels like something resembling poignancy. But I don't think this game is actually all that clever, and that's okay. The honest trashiness of it is appealing to me. On the other hand, I feel like a lot of that appeal is lost in the second half of the game, when you no longer have the director's voice in your ear, and you have far less need to actually carry out the brutal executions, other than because it makes me feel powerful. The whole voyeuristic theme is kind of gone, and there are only visual remnants of it. This is my first time playing Manhunt since I was 14, and the experience was vastly different. When you owned a copy of Manhunt as a teenager amidst hysterical media coverage and stories passed around the salon, there was a lot more weight or severity put on the content of the game. I truly remembered Manhunt to be a straight-faced, nihilistic, and adult experience. Looking at it now, the game is really goofy. Madcap, you might say. Not saying this has anything to do with it aging poorly, but more so that I can see it now that I don't have that influence. There were a few moments that did give me a giggle, particularly one where this guy ran at me while I was holding a shotgun and yelled,
Hey, who are you? Hold on! Are those my shoes?
I'm not as thrilled about the game's propensity for that same brand of smelly boy humor you're likely to find in a Grand Theft Auto game. You know, lavatorial references, boners, real blue material, and it's not that kind of show for this old ghoul. I like when things are zany, and there is some good stuff in that regard. The rest of the lol you're gay humor really pulled me out of the moments I felt the game was effective. And there is some truly sinister stuff here, some effective horror and dark comedy as well. But that's all in its atmosphere, environments, and gameplay. It's situational. For me, I don't think there is much value to the story outside that brief description you'd find on the box. All the shock is in that premise, and I can't deny that that is a strong premise, but the actual story is, I feel, a missed opportunity. A loosely strung series of excuses for you to sneak up behind people. Like I ever needed an excuse for that. Manhunt is still mechanically a solid stealth game, and it has a decent length to it that feels even more padded due to how much waiting and creeping around between shadows you have to do. Each level consists of achieving whatever goal the director has set out for you, while killing as many gang members as you can, and as violently as you can. This requires sneaking up behind them and readying your weapon of choice, causing a reticle to appear that changes color the longer you hold it. Letting go cuts to a cinematic of Cash killing the enemy in some extravagant fashion. The length of time you hold your weapon ready determines the severity of their execution, though your mileage may vary. That's the idea anyway, but often I found the easier executions to be more graphic. Like the sickle, for instance. Getting it in the red has Cash, I'm assuming, disemboweling his enemy, but it's hard to make out exactly what is happening in this animation. It kind of just looks like he's rubbing this dude's tum-tum, whereas the yellow animation is more unpleasant to imagine. You know, the game has aged considerably, but some of these are still downright gruesome. There were two especially that I have vivid recollections of and was eager to revisit and see if they still retained their power. Using the wire to saw someone's head off, and using the machete to whack someone's head off. Still pretty fucking gross. You can also use some weapons or your fists to engage in a fight, but if you're doing this, you're kind of betraying a core tenet of the game. And it's often a big risk. You can pretty easily become stun-locked and overwhelmed. You can pick up and hide slain enemies, which is helpful because if they stumble on a corpse, they become alerted and start searching the area for you.
He's picking us off! Stay sharp!
You can somewhat keep track of them with the minimap, which is quite cleverly integrated based on sound. Enemies don't appear on the map unless they are making noise, so you don't know where they are unless you could conceivably be clued in, you know, by them mumbling to themselves, coughing, walking across gravel. Sound in general is very important to gameplay, especially in baiting enemies into traps. You can do this by intentionally making noise to draw them near you, or by throwing anything from a bottle to a severed head to alert them. PS2 and Xbox users could also use a headset to yell into, which works similarly. This was also pretty inventive as the director's instructions would be fed through your headset, though this feature is absent from any other iteration of the game, including this one. Certain enemies, like the Cerberus soldiers, will be a little too smart for this method and will force you to get more creative. They will also disrupt your tactics by firing blindly into shadows or using flashlights. You're otherwise pretty much invisible in the dark, but occasionally enemies will investigate further and bump into you, forcing you to either engage with them or sprint off to find another hiding spot, which is actually pretty easy unless they have guns. Once guns are introduced, there are long stretches where it feels like, oh, this is just like the gun game now. I have a gun, they have a gun, it's just guns now. But that does start to even out eventually and reaches this interesting place. Well, I don't know if it reaches it, but it approaches it for sure. And it's this place where everyone has guns, but the game still feels like a horror game. I think this is in part because Cash isn't a bullet sponge. Like, you shoot him once or twice and he will die. So you start trying your darndest to remain stealthy, using the executions and whatnot, and considering the consequences of firing your gun. It gets really tense when firefights start to feel like such a gamble, where you could easily take out a small group of guys one moment, then get flanked by one and die instantly another. I caught glimpses of this feeling in between levels that do become legitimately boring shootouts, but I was fascinated by this prospect. The control shares a lot of similarity with Grand Theft Auto, especially with aiming, where you have that kind of soft auto aim, but then you can choose to aim freely. I feel like it's less clunky, but similarly unresponsive. I always felt like my brain and hands were reacting faster than Cash was, so hopping out from behind cover usually resulted in someone fucking using hacks. It's a pretty difficult game. I say fully expecting a healthy demographic of gamers that would laugh at me for saying that and spit on me, call me a little boy. I thought it was pretty tough though. Requires a lot of patience and planning, and it employs traditional save points, so dying does have some weight to it. It can kind of be a bummer. Though the loop can be kind of repetitive, Manhunt is relatively smart about teaching you something or giving you something that would ordinarily seem like an advantage and then denying you that advantage. I became really skeptical of any time it seemed like they were handing me something helpful. Oh sick, a sniper rifle! There were a couple times they do this thing where you're operating a crane while being attacked and you're supposed to use the crane to kill enemies, but that just did not work for me. Maybe that's a buggy PC port issue, but that was not a thing that was going to happen. There are some issues with this version for sure in getting it to run and then playing it without something obnoxious interrupting you. It's very odd that Rockstar is Rockstar, yet one of their games requires so much third-party assistance to run, and they don't seem to have any interest in addressing that. Like the first time I started it up, this gate just won't open. So I guess the game's over. I need to go in there. I can't go in there, so I need to get in. Judging on how quickly you navigate a level and how much bloodshed you've caused, you are given a score at the end. I didn't care about this. You don't tell me how to kill people. Game. Except for that part where it is very much required that I do follow your instructions on how to kill people. But other than that, it spans a variety of enticing environments like a dirty abandoned alleyway, a dirty abandoned junkyard, a dirty abandoned zoo, a dirty abandoned mall, and other dirty and abandoned classics. I didn't mean for that to be snarky. This is where I wish most games were set. We might as well, get used to it now. It's fitting that sound is so important to Manhunt, as it is selectively very good. Things like footsteps and punches aren't that great, and are most likely recycled from San Andreas, but as soon as something violent is happening on screen, that sound design really shines. Enemies gasp and choke on blood as their heads are being lopped off or caved in by a crowbar. It's especially satisfying when you cut them off mid-sentence with a brutal takedown. I like murder. I don't know if I'd refer to any of this as realistic. I mean, to a degree. It's over the top, but it's gruesome to say the least. Brian Cox is a sheer delight as the voice of the director.
Butcher them, Cash. Cut them up, beat them down, and choke the fucking life out of them. Get on with it, Cash. I want some gore. You're really getting me off, Cash.
He expertly embodies the role of a sleazy, sadistic creep. I think I've always just liked his voice ever since. I'm sorry, I know you're probably good in a lot of things and carried a lot of respectable roles. You were one of the better interpretations of Hannibal Lecter. But I'm gonna say Super Troopers.
Baba, I forgot the coffee. My bad, Captain.
Cash sounds like a dork. All the enemies are doing a great job at being unlikable and easy to see yourself killing.
I can see you ain't got no self-respect. It's only natural for your kind. Come on out, you bean-eating chicken shit. I'd hide myself too. If I was a shit-skinned ghetto dweller like you, shit, we can sort this out like gentlemen. What am I saying? You're a half-breed scum.
You gonna hide all night? Half-breed? Not hide no hair of the half-breed.
Some of their idle banter is actually really funny, especially from the smileys. Come to think of it, each gang, and like the character model in said gang, does a neat job of illustrating what kind of shitty person they are. In the dialogue they mutter to themselves. It feels like they have some semblance of a backstory, a reason for being here, and an opinion on that.
Come out, kids. It's okay. It's safe now. I promise it's safe. Girls? Where are you, girls? Don't be afraid of your daddy.
My favorite part of the sound design is how much tension is built when you're stalking someone. You have this atmospheric track of ambient sound, a layer of low, rumbling synth music, and the sound of your heart beating. The music is great because it's all dirty, blown-out synths that just simmer in the background until you're spotted and they erupt into this slasher film horror sting.
Keep it lively. Contact. I got contact. They're on to you.
Despite being really effective most of the time, it doesn't have a great deal of variety or character. I kind of wish This vibe was pushed further and areas sounded more distinct. It all kind of blurs together though. An unfortunate side effect of Rockstar neglecting Manhunt's PC port is a common audio bug where the music loops awkwardly in short bursts, and more upsettingly, certain sound effects that trigger in scripted events also have a habit of looping. This includes the sound of this guy using the facilities, or this guy watching HBO's Girls.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen the show, but I assume this is what it sounds like. So yeah, that sound just keeps going long after we've cut the power to the TV, after we've left this area. Not even pausing the game will stop it until you make it to the next level. Your only hope is to go into the game files and delete the file itself. Again, these aren't the sort of things I should be finding a solution for. Being a linear experience allows for more detailed environments and character models that still look nice enough. I like that your inventory is visible on Cash's body. That is an underrated detail that I wish more games would implement. There is a noticeable grime to everything. It successfully looks messy and run down, and the slight film grain accentuates that. Some assets look better than others. If you were confused, this is an example of one of the better ones. I like the way Manhunt looks in theory more so than in execution. The idea of cutscenes being shown through grainy CCTV footage is inspired and justified as an aesthetic choice, and having the whole game set across a carousel of seedy locales is great, but there is something about it all that just makes my eyes roll when I can see all too clearly the parts borrowed from GTA, like the UI and weapons that show up in colorful floating orbs. I guess I don't see how these really gamey elements fit into the vibe. It's just junky looking elements getting in the way of the good stuff. Shitty, unfair game. The game is crappy and unfair. The hunters always spot you and kill you no matter where you hide. That's not true, buddy. In fact, it's like the whole point of the game, not to be seen. But sometimes you do get seen, and it's like, no, they saw me. It's like part of the whole challenge of it all. It sounds like you haven't quite got a hold of how it works, but you keep at it. A cool concept, but poorly executed game. This game was fun for about 2 hours. Then it became more of the same old thing. Sneak up behind a guy, kill him, and move on to the next guy, who you end in the same manner. Over and over. The fighting mechanics are terrible. You're a big burly Vin Diesel lookalike who has to hit the average baddie about 10 times just to knock him down. Yeah, right. If the fighting and combos were better and the game had more story, it technically has no story whatsoever, I may have liked it more. Rent before you buy. Well, the fighting mechanics are terrible, but that's because they are a last resort. Like, the game isn't built for you to go around punching everybody. You'll notice in Vin Diesel pictures, he also uses weapons. Try to find a Vin Diesel movie where he doesn't have at least 2 guns on his person. I think you're underestimating how difficult it would be to punch someone to death. It's a long, difficult process. It's gonna put a considerable strain on you physically and emotionally. Not that I know anything about that. Just plain dull. Maybe this game was controversial when released. I guess that was part of the attraction. But the gameplay is rather dull. For a great deal of the game, you walk around with a club. Clubbing people to death just doesn't do it for me like the flash of a gun muzzle. You have to sneak up on people to kill them, or you get mauled. Stealth is fun to a point, but it's tedious after 3 or 4 levels. After 2 levels of nothing but clubs and bricks, I was like, enough already. Bring on the guns. Just plain boring. I hate to say this, but I think you bailed right as you were about to get your wish. The guns were coming, and then you get so many guns that it kind of becomes monotonous again. In a word, wicked. I think sums up this game rather well. Rockstar delivers another game worthy of playing. As an adult who enjoys video games, I can't play this cartoony crap being developed by other companies. That's where Rockstar changes the game. I can already hear the angry parents carrying on about this one. Mad soccer moms calling Senate and whining all night, while in the other room her son plays Manhunt. This is not a game for the weak-minded. The reason being, this game can stay with you, and we don't need some guy in an office ducking behind cubicles armed with a Mont Blanc pen and a stapler, getting ready to ice the chump, as the director puts it. 2. The weak-stomached. Logic for this is, the violence is amazing, not the crappy old Mortal Kombat blood flying. This is grainy, graphic, morbid cutscenes with a level of brutality not matched in another video game. Example, execution with a bat actually sends pieces of skull flying, and you can find them on the ground. Wicked. 3. The children. Do not let your little kids play this. Come on, parents, have some common sense here. If you let little Johnny play this and 2 weeks later he comes from around a corner with a glass shard and stabs you with it 4 or 5 times in the face, in my humble opinion, you had it coming. If the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers had little kids at the bus stops beating the hell out of each other with terrible kung fu, then I shudder to think what a game like this will have them doing, breeding a generation of hunter-killers. Use common sense, parents. I know Ritalin is easier than parenting, but when Johnny is a freak, it's your fault. Terrible parenting, or bad genes, or something. Long-winded? Yes. Helpful? I don't know. But one thing is for sure. Manhunt is the game to have if you want a dark, strategic, violent fun. I love everything about this review. My only concern is simultaneously admonishing adults for buying their kids violent video games while admitting that doing so would activate the school shooter sleeper cells that all kids secretly are. Like, this is just who this guy is all the time, and there's something beautiful about that. I don't know what this segment's for anymore. I do a lot of defending of the game Harvester, some would say wrongfully, a precursor to Manhunt that aspired to achieve the scrutiny and outrage that Manhunt received. But if Manhunt had something to say with its violence, I couldn't quite make it out. I came across a number of think piece articles that suggest it has this deeper, introspective meaning, that it makes us ask ourselves what it means to live in a society where murder happens daily and is reported daily, and it becomes routine and we do nothing to stop it. Harvester's thesis was loud and clear by the end, but by the end of Manhunt, I just felt like I got a high score in an arcade game. Was that the point? That it trivialized or made a game out of sadistic violence? Was it a statement on free will, of our fascination or complacency with violence? I sort of doubt it. I think it more likely it was the construct of a bunch of dudes chuckling to each other in a dev team break room about how fucked it would be if we did that, especially considering the fact that controversy and violence has nothing but routinely made Rockstar's output a household name. I don't mean that as a criticism, that is a valid adult experience, but I do think it could have utilized this story more to, if not make some meta statement on violence or video games or escapism, then at least have more of a substantial story than, you did this to me, now I'm gonna get you. Well, I got you. There is character there in the director and the gangs. Those are fun ideas, but it's just not a game that seems all that concerned about telling a story. The gameplay has a solid foundation that lingers on one strategy for maybe too long before switching things up, but I do see an effort to keep you on your toes with different challenges, like escort missions and certain requirements for kills. It's still a pretty intense experience, with some great sound design, a great vocal performance from Brian Cox, and some iffy leftover visual ideas. I'd recommend it if you like stealth games and dark comedy, and you have low expectations as to the adult nature of it, because the goalpost for that in video games has moved considerably since. If you're going to play it, I can't believe I'm even thinking of saying this, but maybe avoid the PC version. Rockstar sure has. Alright! Well, that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Hey, let me pull the names up here. I'm actually in a car right now, so I don't... Just give me a fucking second. I'm trying... Okay, coming up now. Special thanks to Ailing Uncle, Resurrection, Game Master, Bayard Brown, This Deal Is Getting Worse All the Time, Nazim Kamal Uray, Mr. Benjamin, News Time, Karen Mayville, Dark Raptor 86, Charles Marr, Oysto, Alexander Sundin, Octo, Dylan Sorum, Alexander Smith, Joseph Zanoni, Nilanthrope, Daniel Person, Doss Days, and Sebastian Wappler for donating at the highest tier of my Patreon. And thank you for fucking, like, all of the patrons. I said that like I was going to launch into something that I had prepared. Seriously, especially right now, thank you so much for continuing to support me during this very difficult, turbulent time we find ourselves in. Especially those who, try to eke out a living making things on the internet, because we would probably need you more than ever right now. So I'm very grateful if you've stuck around to help me out, help keep me making some lower to mid-tier quality content content for you. I fucking appreciate it more than anything. I love you so much, and I hope, hope I get to keep doing this. Like, comments, I should get this out now since I never do it and I need it. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord where we occasionally post polls and shit, so that's how this game got a review. We do nights and stuff. I shouldn't say that out loud. That's probably illegal. We do talking about regular things night. Yeah, in the description I have a bunch of ways you can help me. I have merch now. That's it's a little pricey, I admit, but I didn't really have control over that. But it helps me either way. There's that, there's Patreon, there's PayPal. There's, you leaving a comment saying, hang in there, buddy, and that means a lot too. Anyway, the video's long enough. Here's the song.